We sat down with the rules team from the Warhammer studio to find out more about the new edition of Warhammer 40,000.
And here is how it went. So, welcome everybody. We're joined now by Josh and Kenny from the rules team in the Warhammer studio. It's really great to have you here with us to talk to us a little bit about the new edition of Warhammer 40,000. It'd be good to start off with the topic of where you even begin when you're approaching a new edition of this game that so many people love.
So that's a really good question. Right out the gate, we tried to establish, what are players looking for from Warhammer 40,000? At its core, it is a war game. People want to build their armies to specific themes and then be able to have fun and enjoyable games with their opponents, either reenacting battles that they believe from the background or just have a good time on a Thursday night when we're having an available time to play a game.
Sure.
So starting from that point, we then go to, over the last edition, what have we seen a lot of concerns about? What have players not liked? What have players had issues tackling? And then we put that on a short list of things that we want to look for solutions for as we start looking at the next edition.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what kind of things did you have on that list? What were the problems that were here are the things players are telling us that they'd like to see a change to?
So right off the bat, one of the core things was the diversity of terrain. Very much, a lot of people talked about that they only used ruins because of the obscuring rule. We saw a lot of concerns about the fight phase. We would watch people play it, and then they would forget to do their pile-ins, or they would forget to do their consolidates as they got so excited to do their next fight. They would miss these steps, and then when they would want to go back to them, players would be like, oh, well, that happened so long ago, that would have changed that decision.
That makes sense, yeah.
And so those right out the gate were some really core elements. Cover and AP1 and how much that changed the damage profiles of what guns some people were saying were good versus not good. We wanted to make sure that the fantasy of a gun that was supposed to pierce armor felt better, and that's why we looked at the cover rules as well. Josh, I don't know if you have any other ones you want to bring
particularly in? Cover is a good one to point out. One of the other areas in the previous edition, it was about AP, but that had differing effects for different factions. So Chaos Demons don't have armor values generally. They're almost all invulnerable saves. So cover didn't really give them any impact. Sure. Whereas something like a Space Marine, where armor is a big part of their playstyle, it was really beneficial for them. Whereas now with the new system where it affects the hit roll, that's a much bigger difference. Demons, it affects them, or it affects every faction much more uniformly across the range.
So it was almost the wrong way around, wasn't it? Because if you had a very good armor save, you benefited more from the cover, whereas if you had a poor armor save, it almost didn't matter because you didn't get the save anyway.
Yes, yeah, and also from our side, thinking about how would cover apply, it would be the hits would hit the cover instead of you, and so applying it to the hit roll rather than to your save felt more natural for the game mechanic as well.
Plays into the theme a bit more, right?
So there's a little bit of theme and a little bit of balance kind of combining to give you the direction for the rule.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Cool.
And then amongst the feedback, we also heard a lot about the fact that players would just show up and pick a mission. They weren't thinking about the mission they were sending their armies on, and that's a big part of the fantasy of building an army or a force in Warhammer 40,000. It's being assembled to go do something, and so that ended up inspiring a lot of our mission changes that we did this edition.
So that's obviously
construction.
in the chapter approved deck.
In the chapter approved deck.
And that's quite different, isn't it, as a structure, as a generating missions is very different from the previous edition.
Correct. It's actually part of making your army now versus an extra thing that you do after you show up with your army. So now, as a result of force dispositions, when you build your army, you unlock force dispositions for it. When we show up, we go, I'm a take and hold focused army. You might be Purge the Foe. That tells us our mission. And now we're going to play a narrative mission about that we've designed to be fair and balanced.
So do you think people are going to decide the type of army they want to have first and go I'm going to try and build a take and hold army and then make the army? Or do you think most people are going to go the other direction and build the army first and then kind of work out what kind of missions you might send it on?
So it's actually meant to be for both. So we didn't want to focus that it had to be one way or the other. We really wanted to make sure that if you're a person who goes, I love boys, I want to make a war horde, I just want to throw them at you, you can focus on that. And that's why we changed some of the detachment rules and let you mix and match detachments in 11th edition so that your army that you have in your head, you can build. But if you're also a person who likes, my play style is that I really like doing actions and I like kind of being sneaky, well, then you could potentially go pick disruption or priority assets because that's a play style you're interested in. And then you can build your army to let you make that play style.
So you've hinted at detachments a little bit there as well. That's another big change in this edition, isn't it? The way that armies kind of gain their army special rules. How does that work this edition? What's the big changes?
So for us, one of the things that we looked at through 10th edition, the detachment had to be very broad. You've got one detachment for your army, and it was trying to position a narrative, but also it often meant that you're trying to make it work for a whole army, and certain rules didn't cross over very well in that respect. So what we've now looked at doing is factions. There still are army-wide detachments if you liked that style and you have an overarching theme that you want to play. But we also want to give you choices where if you have certain favorite unit types or certain favorite play styles, you can pick a detachment that's smaller, but it might be more focused on particular units, but it'll give you key ways of playing for those units. So in a 2,000-point game, you'll have 3 detachment points to spend. Some detachments will be 3 points to start with, so that is the same as if you were playing 10th edition right now. Sure. But other detachments will be 2, some will even be 1. On the day 1 launches, we're giving all factions some day 1 detachments, which are all 1 detachment point. So you can mix and match depending on your playstyle and the units that you like, and find a combination that feels exciting for you.
And is the idea of that we think we'll see more diverse armies? People will start to kind of find spaces in their force for those smaller units that maybe didn't synergize very well with their force previously, but now you go, I can finally have those land speeders I was looking forward to, or these jet bikes, or whatever.
Exactly that. Or also players can try and it's another way of they can build a narrative around their force in that they love land speed. As I use that example, they might go, well, we know for Space Marines there's 4 land speeder variants they can take, and that's not including Dark Angels who have additional land speeder variants. You might go, I want to run as many land speeders, that's my favorite unit type. We can now let you do that without compromising the rest of your force. I can do that with one of my detachment points, but then I still want to run some Terminators and I want to use these units, and then you can mix and match to suit your style. But we will still continue to support bigger overarching themes if that's what you want to do as well.
Can I ask, you've been playing a lot of this yourselves. Mm-hmm. What are you doing as you're building your armies with these detachments? What are you finding to be commonplace for yourselves?
So at least for myself, what I often start with is, because the codexes are maintaining from a 10th edition to 11th,
sure,
you've got a starting point already. So I would look at the armies that I already have, what I'm currently using, and then see how they play in 11th, and I'd start there, and then I can start to make tweaks as I play with the rules and say, oh, actually, this unit feels like it has more value now with the way the rules have changed, or this new detachment has unlocked options for me for one of my armies that previously, because the overarching detachment I took didn't support them, I was like, these don't fit. I love that unit, but it just doesn't fit in my Canoptic Court for Necrons, for example, which is all about Cryptex and Wraith units. In now, I can, well, actually, there's a 1 DP detachment which supports warriors. So I can put some warriors in my list that I liked, but they just didn't fit in my old list. Now I can support them in a way that I couldn't before.
So very specifically bringing some things maybe that have sat on the sideline in a lot of your games back into play because of the way
that's
that. Really nice.
And then you can choose to, maybe your next game, you might go, well, I tried the 1 detachment point warrior detachment. Maybe next one I'm going to try a different one which supports some different units. And I think most people, we play 2,000 points or 1,000 points, but we often have much bigger collections.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's okay, how this game I'm going to swap out some of these units and try a different combination, and maybe I like that, or actually no, I preferred when I played the original list. And then the other aspect which I think is really interesting is, as you build your army, because as Kenny mentioned, the force dispositions are aligned to the detachments, you can even start to look at sometimes the detachment itself. You're picking it not just because of what it gives your army as a rules basis for the units, but it's also, it unlocks a new play style of missions that I want to play.
Yes,
so,
of course. Yeah.
Oh, I've been playing Take and Hold a lot with my Necron force because that's what fits this detachment, but I really want to try some disruption missions. Oh, well, if I take the disruption detachment, I can now unlock those missions and start playing those and give me a new gaming experience when I go and play my friends.
That sounds fun. Yeah,
it feels like it might be much easier to kind of swap around bits of your army as well. So at the moment, if you've kind of lent into a theme and you want to start collecting a new force, you almost have to build the entire new army, right? Whereas if you have to swap out 2 or 3 units, that's a much easier hobby goal, right? So you could paint that over a weekend or a few weeks and then add it into your force without needing to entirely take the whole army back to the drawing board.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big things we looked at supporting, in that, as you said, in the 10th edition detachment system, because the detachment had to work for a whole army, and they often encouraged you to go down a specific route. So you would design your whole 2,000 point list, if we're using 2,000 points as an example, around that detachment. As you said, if you wanted to swap out 1 or 2 units, sometimes you might feel that they weren't supported in the way you would hope they were. Whereas now, with the detachment system that we have and the points, if you take a 2 DP detachment or multiple 1 DP detachments, you can chop and change as you play.
So this feels like it presents some really great narrative hooks as well then, right?
Of course. I think one of the ones that I'm a big fan of is the idea that like Tempestus Scions are securing like the early deployment, and then like a tank detachment can be another part of my army, and they're coming up into the board and trying to secure behind them. So you have this really aggressive like airborne idea that you then pull up with like tank support because they wouldn't just already be there. And so I like making lists from that angle, and it's been really fun to do with some of the new detachments.
And it really leans into the stories often that exist behind these armies, right? And how you expect them to play based on, the novels or the animations or whatever.
Correct. And I think a big part of this system is giving more power to you as the hobbyist to try to find the pieces of detachments that support the narratives you have in your head, and that you're not trying to just fit your units into the one that we've given you.
That's really interesting.
So we talked quite a lot about army building. Let's talk a little bit about the core rules themselves. Josh, you mentioned the fight phase has changed quite a lot. Can you talk a bit about how the changes, how that works now?
Yeah, so there's some big changes there, but I think one of the biggest changes of the fight phase is now you don't declare the targets of your charge before you make a charge. You just declare you're going to make a charge, roll your dice, and then you can see which unit's in range and choose to charge the units that you could charge if you're in that range. So I think that's, for us, that was a big thing about in 10th edition, there could often be sort of an indecision point where players, I really want to charge that unit that's further away, but if I declare it in 10th, if you declare that unit and didn't make the roll, then you stood still. You couldn't move at all.
Right,
so it was a point for players where they had to really, do I want to go for that 10-inch charge or 9-inch charge when I've got a unit of guardsmen in front of me 3 inches away?
You pick the safe choice most of the time.
So you go, I'm just going to pick the safe choice, because if I fail this charge, my unit's sitting there and open for retaliation in the next turn. Whereas now, because of the change to the charge roll, I roll the charge and then I declare. So I don't have to worry about making that choice. I can roll, see which units are in range, and then plan from there. So we feel that will really help speed up some of the fight phase options. You don't have that paralysis of decision of, should I go for that charge or not? So I think that's a really nice change. And one of the other things, and this is really minor, but it'll help the flow of the game. And one of the things in 10th edition is that charge ranges were done from my base to engagement range, and every other measurement in the game was done base to base. So when we've seen it at events, when you'd go to events and people go, it's the charge is 8 inches, and you'd go, is that 8 inches on the dice roll and I'm actually in range, or do you mean I need to roll a 9? So there was always a question. So what we've unified it now that all the measurements are done base to base. So when you make a charge, it's exactly the same as when you're measuring, am I in range of shooting, or when I want to move, it's the same style of measurement. So we don't have that switch between the two systems. Sounds really minor, but it will just hopefully clean up when people are talking about they're speaking in a common language.
I think this leads to like a core direction we had this edition too, is we really wanted to make sure that the rules were doing the best job they could, that you didn't get upset with the way that your opponent communicated with you. If I go, it's 8 inches, and then you roll and you go, well, you actually needed a 9 because what I was saying is you needed an 8 distance, you're like, well, that's annoying. So we want to, wherever we can, clean that up in the rules to make it sure that you are playing the same game. So when you go, Thursday, 2,000 points, you want to play Warhammer? Like, you're both coming with the same expectation.
It's a really nice thought process. I imagine it's the same for all of us, but lots of my friends, people I really care about in life, I met at the other side of a gaming table on like a games night or a tournament, right? And that common language that you share when you're playing a game is that foundation that starts that relationship off, right?
Correct.
And so everything that you can do to smooth that out and make the interaction seamless just helps make that easier and more fun, doesn't it?
100%. And it was something that we really thought about with the way we wrote the rules and the changes we made this edition, was to try to make sure that you had the best time with the person you're playing the game with.
I really like that. That's nice.
So we talked about the charge range a little bit there. There's also some changes to things like consolidation and pile-ins and things like that. How does that change up? How does it change the way the combat phase works?
Yeah, so again, carrying on from really what Kenny's just said there, and one of the things that in 10th edition, each unit individually piled in, each unit individually consolidated. So it was very timing focused. You had to remember to do it at the right time. And often what would happen in the middle of the game, you're enjoying yourself, you're playing through, you get excited, move on to the next fight with different units. And then you resolve that fight, and then you go back, I should have consolidated this unit onto the objective. And we instantly are putting the question on the opposing player then to say, should I allow my opponent to do something out of phase that they maybe have gained an advantage or not from because of the timing? And we're putting it on the players. Whereas what we've tried to do now is you make your charges, and then everybody piles in, both sides. The attacking player goes first, and then the defending player, and then again the consolidation's resolved in the same way. So rather than having to remember a timing step and potentially missing it,
you're less likely to miss it, basically.
We've given you a set timing to do it. You can resolve all your pile-ins, and then you get to move on with the fight phase and enjoy the fight phase, rather than having to jump backwards and forwards and remember, I should have done this here, and then feel you've either missed out or the timing was off. So that's what we've tried to do to again put it on the rules to help you play through the turn rather than putting it on the players themselves.
Okay.
And there was a fun little consequence of that, which was in certain situations you could potentially do some gamey things to like get units out of fights. We introduced a new type of fight this edition called the overrun fight. So when I select units to fight, if for some reason a unit who should have been able to fight during the fight phase got in a weird situation, they can make another pile-in move.
Yep.
And that really cleaned up the system. So we got the benefit of really clear steps, but then also made sure that if you tried to game it so your opponent couldn't get into fights, you basically were giving them power by letting them get extra distance and picking up new units.
But generally speaking, if you've done the hard work to get across the battlefield, make the charge, get into combat, you're probably going to get to fight.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. So there's been some changes to the way that the kind of damage and wound allocation works as well, hasn't there?
Correct.
How does that work? How does that change the way the game plays?
So one of the things that we observed a lot in the attack sequence of the game when we were watching people play is that depending on players' knowledge of the game, they would either just fast roll dice everything, which is actually not the way that the rules were built. It's just a thing that we all do because it makes it faster to play. Yeah. And if you're a player who knows a lot about it, you know the moments you actually need to stop doing it and then slow down the rolls to then make sure that you get the most advantageous situation. And so we've actually made fast dice rolling core this edition. So the whole attack sequence is based off of picking a weapon in your unit, then selecting all the similar weapon profiles, and then rolling them all together. Yeah. As a result of that, when you're targeting a mixed unit, so an attached unit with multiple units in one, they might have different defensive profiles. So when you're going to roll the saves for that unit, you now just pick the order in which the different profiles take the saves. So you go, the bodyguard go first, then this character, and then this character. Yeah. You roll all the saves, you start with the ones, and you just assign them with the bodyguard. Then you go to the 2s, 3s, 4, and then you see who lives and doesn't die as a result of who was left at the time that you assign the save.
And if it's shooting at something like a simple squad that has everybody's got 2 wounds and a 3-up save, it works exactly the way it does currently. And it's only in those kind of slightly weird edge cases where previously players would be like, roll them one at a time, and you'd have to roll them and then roll another dice and then roll them and roll another dice.
Exactly.
That's what it sort of cleans it up. And I think there's an example in the book, isn't it, with like one of the most complicated units, which is Celestine and her 2 Gemini and a unit of Battle Sisters, and it kind of plays it out and tells you how it works.
Yep. And there's a fun kind of narrative consequence that comes from that system as well, which is the fact that characters with good defensive profiles live longer. And so because of the attacks that you do, depending on how you attack with them as the attacker, the defender may have their character left because it has a really good defensive profile.
Yeah, if you've got a better save or an invulnerable save or something like that, it's much more likely your character's still standing after the bolters are finished.
And so you have these really cool moments in like the middle part of the game sometimes where a few characters are running around and getting into fights with each other because they survived the combats with the ranged attacks during those turns.
Yep.
With the plot armor, obviously.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
We had quite a lot of fun trying to work out if we could think of a more complicated example than Celestine and her bodyguard, and couldn't. So
I think there's some Necron ones that are quite complicated with stuff and cannot take stuff in.
But on purpose, we actually did pick a
complicated...
It
illustrates the point really nicely.
We went, what's one of the most complicated examples we could use to... And if we can explain it clearly in a rulebook here, then it should work.
And the thing that's nice is it's not a particularly complicated explanation, so it seems to do the job.
It's very straightforward when you play it as well, so that works really nicely. Cool. Any other kind of big changes in the core rulebook that you're excited to kind of see in action?
So terrain was a big one. One of the things that we were really excited about was simplifying the terrain system into just giving the benefits you wanted as a player and that the game needed to function. So we've simplified terrain down into dense terrain, light terrain, and exposed terrain. And terrain that is dense or light is obscuring. So the area that it's on blocks line of sight, which is what Ruins did in 10th edition, but now all terrain does that. And the cool thing with that is that we have a really awesome terrain set that we built the rules for this edition. We built them in concert with the rules, so it works, it looks great, and it's very functional. Alongside that, if you want to swap out any of those pieces, it will keep the same functionality.
So if I've still got my green cactuses with red spikes sticking out of them from 2nd edition, I can sprinkle those around the battlefield and it still works?
Exactly. If you want to replace the plasma generator with a little bundle of those, it's going to do exactly what you need it to do from a gameplay standpoint, but you can create a very different looking board.
Cool. How about you, Josh? Anything else you're excited to see in action?
So I think one of the we've hinted on it in the fight phase already, but there's a number of places we've done it in, like the timing cleanups to make it easier for players. We've tried to do that across the board. So Overwatch, for example, is now there's no in the charge phase anymore. It is just at the end of the movement phase. So what currently happens in 10th is I move a unit and then I
look
ask,
at you.
I look at my opponent.
How do you feel about that?
Would you like to Overwatch? And I repeat that 5 or 6 times until they either decide to Overwatch or not. But I have to give them the chance.
You also have to know the order you're going to move them in, right? So there's a huge thinking step for the player moving their army.
Whereas now, because it's a set time at the end, myself as the player, I can move all my units and then my opponent gets a chance to react. But it's like one clean reaction point rather than, again, having them to go back and forth multiple times in the same turn. So I think that's quite a nice cleanup we've done.
It's much faster as well.
Yeah.
Like in practice, the movement phase now is not a kind of very cagey affair. It's like, I just want to move my army.
Yes, correct. We also did another thing, which you even kind of alluded to there, which is you can just move through your own units this edition to help with that, because that was another element where you're like, oh, I moved the tank first, now he's blocking my other tank. Can I take that back? But then I don't remember where he is, and we're just like, just move through them, because you don't have the interruption with Overwatch now. It's not the end of the world to do that. You can clean that up, and then you understand the narratives of them getting out of each other's way or slightly being off on the timing.
Sliding over the hood like an action film.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, they're just little quality of life improvements, aren't they? That help the whole thing feel more sort of streamlined and play more smoothly. It's nice.
Brilliant. Exactly that, and the same with things like making an ingress move. In the past, we had a reserve step in 10th edition where so you had to wait until the end of the movement phase before you could bring in any of your reserves in your movement phase. That no longer is the case. If your unit's deep striking in or walking on from a board edge, you can do that at any point in your movement phase.
People used to do that anyway, didn't they? They'd be like, I'm going to put this unit down here. They're obviously not there yet, but now I'm going to do a movement phase. Now they're going to show up there. And you're like, oh, what a surprise.
Yes, so, exactly. Well, often because if you're coming in from an ingress move, you have the distance restrictions. Distance restrictions are still there. So exactly that. You go, I need to put this unit down. I'm going to measure all my distances out. Oh, it can fit there. Oh, well, I'm not going to place it there yet because it can't come in until the end. I've got to move everything else. Now, you can do that first if you want to.
It's imaginary until the end of the movement phase, and then it's real. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So lots of these little timing things we've tried to smooth across in the movement phase, shooting phase, and fight phase to just make it easier to flow through the game.
Great. Sounds awesome.
Another fun little thing with that too is just the fact that everything is a move now. So one of the weird things with the quirks of like the details of the rules is being like, oh, when you set up a thing, is it moving? We would then have to be like, oh, well, this counts as a normal move for the purposes of these rules, but then doesn't count as a rule for these moves. And
so I can react to that. Can I react to that?
Etc. So actually all moves are part of either moving or setting up, and then we explain all of the different types of moves and go, these are moves. You have completed a move. Rules now go, did I complete a move? And then you just move on.
Great. Well, we talked a lot about the core rules. We talked about missions. We talked about army design. There's another box of cards in the Armageddon box, which is this one here. This is the campaign one. What is that box? What does it do?
So that is Dominatus, and what it's really there for is to allow players to show up to, let's say, a weekend get-together or an event with their normal army and play a number of linked games. And so we took the elements that we really liked from Crusade, but tried to take out all the homework. So now what you can do is go like, oh, I have this really cool army. I'm going to show up with, some of my buddies. I'm going to go to an event. They're going to run a campaign to fight for the fate of Armageddon. That's what that box specifically does. And after each game, I'm going to either get battle honors or I'm going to get little points of experience that are like one-turn use elements. And you use those to then basically get new options for your army as you go. Then you see who won, who basically took over for the battle. And then at the end, you can reset. So, or you can continue to go. So if you want to turn it into like a league situation where every Tuesday you guys show up, play Dominatus, get some new things. Next week you're going to play again, et cetera, et cetera. You can either run it out quite long or keep it quite short as like a 2-day thing.
So the rules itself seem very simple. Have you found it as you've played it?
Yes, it's relatively straightforward. The density of it is the fact that we also have the ability to switch your missions from the chapter approved deck. So it uses the chapter approved deck and forced dispositions for like what missions you fight. But if you want, you can use one of the narrative agendas from the Dominatus deck and replace your mission with that objective, which is very linked to the idea of what you're doing on Armageddon.
So that implies that in the future we might see other sets like that for other war zones doing other narrative things.
Yes, potentially.
That'd be cool, wouldn't it? So before we begun, Eddie and I were talking about what we've enjoyed as we've been looking through and coming to understand the new edition. And we were wondering what in it that you've worked on. You know, your team's put a lot of effort into making this new edition and loads of passion and hard work has gone into it. What are you most proud of? What have you enjoyed most? You're hoping people will get out of it?
Definitely proudest and most excited for the mix of army creation and it relating to the missions and like what your army's doing. It's really nice that up front when you're making your army now, you're actively going like, and this is what it's going to go do. And you can think about that and you can get excited about, oh, I'm going to go play that type of a mission. And it's not something that might just randomly happen. It's something that you can prepare for and get ready for and get excited about that narrative and watching that come out in the table.
That sounds cool. Yeah, what about you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Kenny said there, I think what's really exciting is players can now, they can build their force to have the units that they think fit those roles the best. And it's not always about, does my unit do more damage than my opponent's unit? Or I can really think about what I'm trying to achieve on the tabletop and customize my force either through a force disposition or multiple detachments, which let me build my faction in a way that maybe I felt I couldn't represent on the table in 10th edition.
Sure.
So that's a big one for me. And then really it sounds really simple, but one of the things I'm really proud of through the 11th edition rules is we really tried to look at, through 10th, where were the sticking points as people played through a game that people would be like, oh, I've got to resolve this now, or there's a timing issue, or there's a concern there. How do we look at the 11th edition rules so that they can support you playing that narrative game that you wanted to play, and the rules are there to help run the game smoothly, and then you can enjoy your game. And it's not, I'm having to refer back to the rulebook constantly, or I'm going to having to refer back to an army rule or a detachment rule. I can just enjoy the game.
Nice, that's really interesting.
And format-wise, I think one of the big elements with that as well is we reformatted the way we wrote the core rules this edition to assist with that. So if you do have to reference back, it's very clear, it's concise, and it's in one location in most instances.
That's really cool. I know as we played, Eddie and I played a game last week, and the thing that really stuck out to me was as my Space Marines pushed onto the objective, it felt really thematic. They were pushing into ruins, and sort of driving the orcs out of the ruin felt thematic and cool. So there's a lot to enjoy. It has been lovely having you guys come and talk to us about the rules and the effort and work you put into making this a new edition. We're super excited to see it out in the world. So thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. This was great.